Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. It is Iowa Caucus Day, and we're happy to report, even before we get to our official good martini, that Jim Garrity made it home, which is a great martini in and of itself. I'm sure your family is thrilled as well, Jim. But in addition to that, since it's snowing a little bit here in the D.C. area, now that you've been through a week in Des Moines in winter, you can go around and tell all your neighbors and your kids and their friends, ha! You don't know what winter is. So you got that in your back pocket.
Yeah, this really, I went out to get the paper this morning. There was less than an inch, maybe half an inch. I was like, okay, I'm not even putting on a coat for that. I was proud to note that apparently the 5 days, it was a 5-day trip that turned into 6 days. In that span, Des Moines got more snow in a 5-day period than any period since 1941. So I'm glad they saved it all up for me. It was, semi-seriously, it's going to be known as this was the caucus with all the blizzards. I was able to cover the debate, able to see Ramaswamy at a rally at the Capitol and stuff. Talked to some valuable people out there. So it was worthwhile, but I'm just saying, I've spent some quality time in Des Moines now.
All right. Well, maybe you have to go back sometime in the summertime or the Iowa State Fair during a presidential election year. Get those
that's when the smart correspondents
things on a stick. Yeah, yes, they don't do the straw poll anymore, so it doesn't draw quite as much attention. But if you want the least healthy food that's absolutely delicious, that's the place to go in Iowa in the summertime, from what I understand. So, all right, well, let's talk about our good martini now. We know that caucus goers are going to brave the cold in Iowa and make their voices heard tonight. And if the last Des Moines Register poll is any indication, Trump is a heavy favorite. But the good news today is that Biden, the current president, his approval rating just keeps getting lower. This isn't necessarily good for the country when the president is this much of a flop, of a failure, but the American people are seeing it, and that's good. An ABC News Ipsos poll conducted January 4th through 8th, only 33% of those surveyed said they approved of Biden, and now his disapproval rating is up to 58%, so he's 25 points underwater. They also did Trump approval, disapproval retrospectively. So what do you think of his performance as president now, 4 years after the fact? He's underwater by 12 points. So it's not exactly a sterling reminiscence of the American people. 53-41 of the official numbers there. But Biden, as we've talked about so many times, has proven himself on issue after issue to not be effective as president. They're constantly trotting out their talking points. They're constantly trotting out the sycophants like John Harwood. Oh, the American people, why don't they just pay attention to how great everything is? And in the end, a new poll from CBS News also shows that all three of the top Republican presidential candidates would beat Joe Biden right now by various margins. And so, it's going to be tight regardless of who emerges as the nominee. If it's Trump versus Biden, there are massive negatives on both sides. And so that's tighter than a lot of Republicans would like it to be and think it should be, given Biden's figures right now. So, Jim, what do you make of the latest poll?
Two things jump out about at this number. First, the comparison they make that they say is the last time you had a president with a job approval rating this low was George W. Bush from the periods 2006 to 2008. You think about that, the Iraq War was, at some of its toughest and most bloodiest points. Anti-war sentiment was extremely high. We ended up, leading up into the Great Recession, just this 1-2 punch. And we can argue about how well the John McCain campaign did. But I think you can say that, leading into 2008, the stage was set for the Democrats to win back the White House. Just about as bad a set of circumstances as you possibly could have. Heading into that. And so if you're the president and you've got numbers in that ballpark now, you should be panicking. And this leads to my second point, some interesting conversations out there in Iowa. So there are some people, David Axelrod, the former Obama advisor, comes to mind, who are trying to sound the alarm, who are trying to say, look, these are really bad numbers and Biden is really in bad shape. And the common response from both the Biden campaign and a decent number of other columnists and folks who want to see Biden do well is to say, oh, this is bedwetting. This is panic. This is much ado over nothing. I think the David Axelrods of the world have the much stronger argument right now. And this starts to sound like the Biden campaign being blindly dismissive of giant flashing signs. You don't want to head into a reelection campaign with a job approval of 33%. You don't want those numbers to be even lower on issues like the border and education and stuff like that. 28% say he has adequate mental sharpness. Only 28% say he's in good enough physical health. These numbers were in the low 30s last year. This is all really bad. This is all really, really bad for Biden. And if the Biden campaign, like they can either say, oh, this is no big deal, and that as soon as the country sees Trump, they're going to remember why they didn't like him and we're going to be fine. That really strikes me as whistling past the graveyard. I would not want to bet a lot of money on that scenario, because there's always a chance that the American people will say, we're fed up with the way things are. We don't like, we remember why we didn't like the other guy, but we like the economy under him more. We're going to go with that. So, it'll be interesting to see if anything gets the Biden campaign to acknowledge, we're not heading into it with an ideal. Ideally, more than 28% of the country would say that our guy has the mental sharpness to serve effectively, right? That seems like a really minimal, threshold or minimal bar to clear. But I guess we'll see. The Biden campaign really wants to believe that everything's going hunky-dory. And I guess their idea is that if they insist it loudly enough, the rest of us will start to believe it.
Jim, we've raised this question a few times in light of Biden's declining numbers about his performance, about his health, and so many other things. So if you're a Republican, do you want to run against the weakest possible candidate, knowing that you could still lose to him, given the dynamics of the race, and then you're potentially setting the stage for a guy who's literally unable to do anything related to the job for another 4 years? Or do you hope they replace him with somebody who's more with it, but would be equally damaging to the country and potentially harder to beat?
Feels like we got a lot of damage going on, Greg. I made the observation, and President Biden did not address the country between December 22nd and early January, like a 2-week period, 13 days in there. I was on Hugh Hewitt's program this morning, and he noticed the president did not address the country during the airstrikes of the Houthis. Usually, you'd get an Oval Office address, my fellow Americans. We have struck back. We're not seeing Biden out there in circumstances you would usually see a president. There was also this weirdness with Secretary Austin. So I don't think this administration is running the way it's supposed to. I don't think things are the gears of government are turning normally. And that's very worrisome. I don't know if I doubt I'd be very happier with President Kamala Harris, but it seems like we've got a guy who looks every bit as old as the 81 years that he is. And when he has such a light schedule, you figure he's got certain times a day he's good and certain times a day he's bad. And that just strikes me as that's not the situation you want for the presidency. The presidency is one of the toughest jobs in the world. And, we're just kind of all dancing around the fact that Biden is really creaky and there's not as much speed on his fastball as you're allowed to say in the media circles. What it means is he just doesn't address the country when times you'd expect him to, which strikes me as a very bad sign.
We don't dance around it. We talk about it all the time, that he's not up to it, can't leave the stage without getting confused and other things. What was the other day? He was at a bike shop somewhere and just looked absolutely lost. There was another time he landed late at night and just looked absolutely bewildered, was talking to the Marines there trying to figure out what happens next. And it's just not good. And I guess the positive sign for Republicans is maybe you don't have to have that choice, because if they go with Kamala, she might be even easier to beat because her numbers are worse than his.
But if Biden steps down for some reason, then and Harris has to take over, there will be a short-lived rally around the flag effect. And I think it would be kind of as much as Americans say, we want Biden to get out of there, if they suddenly said, oh my God, he had a heart attack or something and he can't serve, there'd be a great deal of sympathy, and I think there would be a certain amount of initial hopes, good luck, Kamala Harris. The country needs it, but it would be tough. Look, if they thought she could win the 2024 election, you'd be hearing Democrats saying yes, she should be running as the nominee in the 2024 Democratic election.
All right, let's go to our first sponsor, and that is 4Patriots. Check out their new website, 4patriots.com/martini, where you will find fantastic deals on products from generators to survival food kits and a couple other things we've mentioned recently, the Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket. Check it out. 80% off. So if you're interested in that, it's a perfect time to get it. Also, the Starfire camp stove, buy 3 and get 1 free. But don't forget about the signature item, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. That solar generator charges more devices for longer in a blackout. Use it to protect against winter storms. With double the capacity, more peak power than ever before, plus new expandable capability for even more power. Comes with a solar panel, fume-free, silent, and safe, 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and to get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And this was a very deflating moment over the weekend when I saw what appears to be several of the provisions in the Senate version of an immigration reform bill that Republican James Lankford is supposedly hashing out with Democrats on the other side. The original idea was, from the Republican perspective when it came to funding the government for the rest of the fiscal year, yeah, we're going to do that, but we've got to get serious about the border. Unfortunately, if these provisions are correct, things are only going to get worse. Because what these provisions suggest means the Republicans have basically surrendered here. From what we're hearing, and the official legislation has not been released, but I have heard no one, Lankford or anyone else on the right, dispute these things. Number 1, increase green cards by 50,000 a year. Number 2, work permits for adult children of H-1B visa holders. Here's the one that's the absolute deal killer. Number 3, immediate work permits to every illegal alien released from custody. And since the vast majority are released into the country, that means they get to work here legally once they're in and waiting years upon years in many cases for their court date, which is only going to fuel the incentive for many millions more to come. It's just a giant reward for illegal behavior. There's also taxpayer-funded lawyers to certain unaccompanied children and mentally incompetent aliens. Expulsion authority for a limited number of days, only if encounters exceed 5,000 a day over a 7-year period. That sounds like a terrible deal as well. And the only thing that's slightly a concession for the Democrats, restricting parole for those who enter without authorization between ports of entry. So, I mean, if you don't deal with asylum reform and all these people who are making up their reasons for coming into the country, and Biden won't enforce the laws anyway, this is all whistling past the graveyard. And like I said, you're going to get way more people into the country. Speaker Johnson has already said, if this is the bill, it's dead on arrival in the House, which means the best case scenario is that the completely unacceptable scenario that's happening right now goes on indefinitely. So it's a lose, lose, lose all the way around.
Greg, by the way, this just handed to me from the Ukrainian forces saying, take your time, fellas. We're doing fine. Go ahead. Don't worry. No, obviously they're not saying that. They're saying, hey, we could use all the help we can get as soon as possible. Really unnerving. And I did not think of James Lankford as being this soft, squishy type. Now, look, this has not been confirmed, but we also haven't seen anybody rushing to the microphones to say, oh, no, this isn't in it there. And you're kind of left wondering, what's in this? That, like, you know, did they decide to start building the wall? Did they decide to put up a lot more security? Like, what's the good? You keep going through this list. You're like, when is the good part? When is the concessions toward those who want greater border security? And there's really not much there, at least in this particular list. Now, again, maybe there's more to this deal or something, but like this is not optimistic. And you know, one of the intriguing factors of the last couple of weeks has been people who say, well, you know, as we discussed in our first martini, yeah, Biden has exceptionally low approval rating numbers on border and immigration, but here are the Republicans coming to work out a grand deal and to help solve Biden's political problems for him. Well, that's one way of looking at it. Another thing is that, you know, Republicans would get a major policy win that their base really wanted and has wanted for a really long time. And I think if, you know, you take the collateral damage of you know, helping Biden a little bit in his reelection bid, I don't think it actually would change. Like, it would mitigate his numbers on immigration much, but I don't to a certain extent. But I don't think it's really going to be, you know, Biden's on a sure track for reelection afterwards. But for that to happen, it's got to be a good bill. And the other thing is, like, people have to feel it. They have to suddenly feel like there's this dramatic reduction in illegal immigration, and they need to not see videos of these migrant caravans heading towards the border and stuff like that. This deal doesn't sound like it would do that in the slightest. So hoping this is not that Lankford. I'd really love for Lankford to come out and say, "Oh no, let me tell you all this good stuff that's in there." And now those reports were erroneous. If they are, then it certainly sounds like he's giving away the store. And oh, by the way, as I said, this is it's not just the border deal that's holding up Ukraine funding. It's also Taiwan funding. It's also Israel funding. There's a whole bunch of stuff we wanted to get done that's all being held up. And you'd think that this would be when Republicans would have an enormous amount of leverage. So we're kind of left scratching our heads here. Maybe the coming days will illustrate more, but at this point, this sounds like at a time when you'd think Republicans would have enormous leverage. It certainly doesn't sound like they're getting a very good deal at all.
No, not at all. And even if they throw a bunch of money at it, as long as the policy and the lack of enforcement remains the same, that's not going to get it done. But that provision of work permits for everybody released from custody into the United States is an absolute deal killer. And any Republican, really any lawmaker who goes along with that, knowing what the reality is going to be after that, is absolutely inexcusable. And Jim, this might be painting with too broad of a brush, but it leads to a frustration, I think, with a lot of conservatives, is that Republicans campaign as conservatives and then shift to the middle, whereas Democrats campaign in the middle and shift to the left, depending on the issue. Mm-hmm. And on some other things, like abortion and stuff, they do that. But it's so maddening that every time, Lankford's given tons of speeches on the floor about how inexcusable the situation at the border is, and then he comes away potentially with this. So it's a frustration that happens pretty frequently, unfortunately. Well, if you can't sleep after hearing what Republicans might be willing to do here on immigration policy, I don't blame you. But if you want some help, I strongly recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. And right now you get 10% off any order at bioptimizers.com/martini and use the promo code martini.
Unlike other magnesium supplements that might be giving you just one or two forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. The 7 different forms of magnesium in this supplement are involved in more than 300 enzymatic reactions within the body. And not only does it help you sleep better, it helps calm your mind and allows you to feel grounded and relaxed during the day, and especially before bed.
So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Go to bioptimizers.com/martini and enter promo code martini to get 10% off any order. Again, that's bioptimizers.com/martini, bioptimizers.com/martini. And Jim, as we officially kick off the voting today for the 2024 presidential campaign, everything old is new again. We've got 2 really old people as the likely nominees for the 2 major parties. And it doesn't even end there. 20 years ago, John Kerry stumbled his way to the Democratic presidential nomination after Howard Dean proved too radical for even a majority of the Democratic voting base that year. But John Kerry is apparently ready to step down as climate envoy, so he can work directly on the Biden campaign. He has decided now that the best way to improve the fortunes for the climate, allegedly, going forward is to tell everyone about the great achievements of this administration to make sure that Biden gets reelected, because there's just too much at stake if, in fact, Biden were not to win reelection this year. Kerry, who is 80 himself, so adding a little bit of a youth movement to the Biden team. And I have to give credit to the folks over at Hot Air for this title. John Kerry lurches from the Biden administration to work with the campaign. For those who don't know, he's often been compared to Lurch from the Addams Family. So, Jim, he's the gift that just keeps on giving for you.
He is. I can put in the scene from The Godfather 3. I keep trying to get out, but they pull me back in. There was almost a little more Larry King. They pulled me back in. One of the things that comes to mind, I'm sure there are some people who forgot that John Kerry was alive. I'm sure there are some people who forgot that John Kerry was serving in the Biden administration as the president's special envoy on climate change. And I've thought about, considering how he was helpful in my career, should I write about all the things he's done as the president's special envoy for climate change? And I pitched this as a magazine piece. I don't know if they're going to like it. Maybe on our, but here's the thing. In the end, Greg, it's going to make a really interesting 3x5 index card. Meaning that what John Kerry has done for the last couple of years is talk about the importance of climate change. And oftentimes stepping on other administration priorities. Among them, one of the reasons we need to end the war in Ukraine is so that we can get back to cooperating with Moscow on climate change. As if Moscow, one of the world's biggest producers of oil and natural gas, has any interest in reducing the use of fossil fuels. Well, yes, China is committing some human rights abuses, but that's not my department. I believe we should focus on climate change cooperation with Xi Jinping because he's so reasonable. Every foreign leader John Kerry meets with, he talks about, it's so great. They're such terrific, even though they are often directly opposed to the United States, hostile to our interests, and in some cases actually striking at our allies and things like that. So I also, you don't get the feeling that anybody in the administration is, closely coordinating with Kerry. I don't know if he gets called onto the carpet. My sneaking suspicion is that nobody else in the administration cares what John Kerry is doing, flying around the world in his private jet. That's the other thing, is that he keeps emphasizing the need to reduce carbon emissions, and he does it by flying a private jet. And he's been asked about this, and it'd be utterly unreasonable to expect him to fly commercial. If John Kerry didn't exist, we would have to invent him. And the other kind of last perfect irony of this is that after having really minimal impact on the Biden administration and being kind of the forgotten man, off gallivanting around the world, attending conferences, and not really having any significant impact, and big news splash and things like that, he's now going to the campaign when if Biden said, or if the Biden team said, oh yeah, we're going to bring in Barack Obama. Okay, they said Axelrod. Okay, Axelrod helped manage 2 winning campaigns. Bill Clinton. Hillary Clinton did not succeed, but Bill Clinton knows a thing or two about how to appeal to white blue-collar voters. And, Jimmy Carter's still kicking around. He didn't win re-election, but you look at all that. John Kerry's never won a presidential election. So why would you take his advice? Because I know, Jim, because I know.
He's saving the world.
I have these conversations with myself all the time.
He's saving the world, Jim. He told us that earlier this year. He's not going to help. But if there's one thing John Kerry's never been short on, it's his opinion of John Kerry. So he thinks he's going to make a difference here. So, Jim, happy writing. Hopefully you get the green light for that. We'll be, I'm sure, bouncing back and forth between playoff football and Iowa Caucuses tonight, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow. See you then.
One more reason that turnout might be lower. I'm okay, it's Iowa. You probably don't have a ton of Philadelphia Eagle fans and Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans. But also it looks like the Pittsburgh-Buffalo game will probably be wrapping up right around the time people would be heading out to go to their caucus site. So if that game goes into overtime, I think there are a decent number of Steeler fans and Bill fans in there. So we'll see how it shakes out. But boy, oh boy, I would not be shocked if, for a variety of reasons, turnout was not as high as one would expect.
Can you just imagine? You've spent years perhaps planning for a presidential campaign, months on the ground in Iowa, spending millions of dollars, and then a disappointing caucus night. What happened? Josh Allen threw an interception late in the game and forced overtime. They had it won. That'd be kind of hard to swallow.
By the way, we didn't get a chance, or we did talk a bit about that. Yeah, we talked after that debate, and I kind of wonder if some of the nastiness and negativeness between DeSantis and Haley was just when people say they want to run for president, you got to be really sure that you want to spend time trudging around Iowa in the snow, being well behind, constant negative media coverage. Every other question is, when are you going to drop out? What are you doing in this race? You got to love speaking to somebody who's met you 3 times before and still can't decide. That is what staying in the Holiday Inn and drinking the coffee that's only lukewarm, and it's not easy going out there and being a presidential candidate, and it's not fun. But I guess some people love doing it, or Asa Hutchinson's wife just wants him out of the house.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos, Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Monday. Join us on Tuesday, please, for the next 3 Martini Lunch.